Disney live-action adaptations seem to consistently underwhelm, and even the stronger ones still typically don't come close to scratching the surface of their potential. And their bad reputation and accusations of tarnishing childhoods doesn't need to be the case at all. It's often a case of the wrong filmmaker being given the material, or just a bad filmmaker being given material at all. So today we're going to be choosing the correct directors who would have absolutely understood the assignment for each Disney live-action adaptation. I just want to say, unlike most self-proclaimed cinephiles, I don't think Disney live-action adaptations are inherently bad at all. I talk about them on my channel so often because I think there's so much potential within them if approached with the right intent. And it's just extremely frustrating to see time and time again that the live-action films are proving everyone right when they don't need to. It's only natural when seeing an animated movie to envision what it would look like in real life, and Disney live-action adaptations so frequently fail to live up to people's imaginations. They often just retread the animated films with less life, less artistry, and less understanding of the stories being told. Like, I guarantee you most of your favorite movies are either based off of another movie, or a book, or a stage play, or a Broadway musical, because there's value within experiencing familiar stories in different mediums and through different perspectives. Disney live-action adaptations should not be trying to replace the animated versions or solely exist to correct any outdated ideals. That's not how anyone would view the Broadway adaptations, because the intention there is to experience the beloved stories and iconography through a different medium with different things to offer. And that's exactly what the function of a live-action film should be, to act as a companion piece to the animated film that exists alongside it and adds to its legacy. It should translate the more abstract, simple, impressionistic nature of its animated counterpart into a more complex, nuanced, tangible world, and lean into the advantages of the medium of live action instead of trying to simply regurgitate material that was created specifically for animation. Show us the same beloved story and iconography through a more three-dimensional lens and adjust whatever necessary to fit this more lifelike medium. That's the winning approach, and the heads at Disney need to establish this rule and communicate it to the filmmakers they hire. Okay, let's just get into it. I'm starting off with the absolute worst adaptation that misunderstood the material the most, and even as its own entity separate from the animated film, it's still just an absolute mess, which I've gotten into in the past. Mulan. Nikki Caro absolutely failed in every aspect, even if some of the lighting and color grading in the earlier scenes is quite good. The film is just a train wreck, completely hollow, emotionally vacant, nowhere near as epic as it claims to be or needs to be, and they made Mulan a superhero instead of an average, clumsy gal who sacrifices her life for her family. The correct director for this project would be Oscar winner Chloe Zhao. Not only is she a Chinese female filmmaker who would provide the much-needed perspective and lived experience to respectfully portray a Chinese heroine, but she also has the directorial skill to take on something like Mulan. She directed the Academy Award-winning indie drama Nomadland, which is a very lyrical, poetic, intimate film that's beaming with empathy and humanity, and on a grander scale, she directed Marvel's Eternals, which is actually quite polarizing, but I mostly think that's just because she had envisioned a ponderous, dramatic, cosmic spectacle, and that vision had been muddied by the Marvel machine. Kevin Feige oversees everything Marvel to such a meticulous degree that the filmmakers don't get to put much of a stamp on the films. Even with that said, Chloe Zhao has proven to be able to skillfully direct epic action sequences with a sense of visual grandeur, which is something that the live-action Mulan film claimed to be doing, but I have eyes, and the animated film was much more epic than that. And on top of all that, we know that Chloe Zhao also roots her storytelling in character, which is something that was another fatal flaw of Nikki Cara's very hollow Mulan film. Okay, moving on to Beauty and the Beast. Now, on the surface, the 2017 Beauty and the Beast flaws seem to lie more in the casting, the costuming, and script, rather than the actual direction. But not only do I think director Bill Condon is largely responsible for those previously stated issues, I think the sloppiness of his direction was kind of hidden by all the visual enchantment and opulence, which was quite beautiful. As a director, Bill Condon has some delicious sensibilities, but he is certainly not a polished filmmaker or storyteller. There are many examples of this in the film that I can't even begin to cover, but I'd say some main issues with his direction particularly lie in the depiction of both Belle and Beast, as well as their relationship, and it's little things that make such a huge impact, from decisions like having Beast be a legit asshole throughout, giving his library to Belle as an afterthought rather than being genuinely excited to give her a gift to show he cares for her, cutting away from tiny moments that showed Beast's humanity and regret in the animation, having the pivotal ballroom scene shot almost completely in wide shots where we can't see the characters' expressions or connection like we could in the animated film, or even in 2015 Cinderella, and having them both come across as cold and clinical rather than warm and charming. I could go on, but point is, Bill Condon fumbled in many respects, certainly held the film back from what it could have been. So, who do I think would have knocked it out of the park? Of course, the master of gothic whimsical period spectacles, Guillermo del Toro. The funny thing is that Del Toro was initially developing a Beauty and the Beast film for Warner Brothers, with Emma Watson attached to star in it, but that fell apart and Emma Watson moved to Disney's adaptation, which I think Del Toro should have moved to as well, and replaced Emma Watson when he found out it had to be a musical. I can't think of a more qualified director to tackle this story than Del Toro, and if you're familiar with his films, you know why. He's the king of dark fairy tales and grand gothic costume fantasies, and his artistry and integrity is at a height that Bill Condon, and most filmmakers for that matter, simply cannot reach. He's shown he can create a genuinely compelling, emotional romance between a human and a creature in the Academy Award-winning Shape of Water. He's shown that he can tap into old Hollywood musical sensibilities in that film as well, and then he fully proved his musical capabilities in his recent Pinocchio adaptation, which also showed how brilliantly he can take a beloved, well-known story and enrich it with very emotionally resonant, thought-provoking, deep, mature themes, while still maintaining its charms and family-friendly nature. Do I need to mention the lavish costume and production design of films like Crimson Peak? I mean, he's not just a thoughtful storyteller, but a skilled showman. So yeah, need I say more? Okay, let's move on to Pinocchio, which is one of the worst adaptations so far. Director Robert Zemeckis has not been good for like a few decades, and I'd actually argue he was never good, but that's a hot take for another day. To get straight to the point, he took Disney's masterpiece Pinocchio and recreated it with his signature uncanny valley wonkiness, as well as cheapened it with his crass, sloppy directorial choices. I don't want to talk about it anymore. My pick for who should have directed Pinocchio is Paul King, and what do you know? He was the original director for the project, but his version was scrapped, and all we have left of it is some concept art, which already seems to be much more tasteful than what we got. It truly is a shame we won't get to see what he had envisioned, because as the director of the universally acclaimed Paddington movies, he knows how to personify something that shouldn't be talking or interacting in the real world and make us fall in love with that character, while skillfully creating a delightfully charming, tasteful movie around them. So yeah, let's move on to Aladdin. Look, I actually enjoyed Guy Ritchie's Aladdin and thought it was very charming, and I did not think that was gonna be the case because Guy Ritchie's sensibilities just don't mesh with Disney. I'd argue his sensibilities don't work anywhere, but once again, that's another hot take that I won't elaborate on. I just don't think he was ever right for this project, and miraculously, it turned out to not be a total disaster. That said, it could have been so much better. The set and costume design looks so cheap, the scale of the film feels smaller than it should, the direction is shaky, and I could say more, but I'll just say who I think should have directed it, and that's Taika Waititi. Please erase Thor Love and Thunder from your brains for the sake of this video, because I'd rather blame Marvel for that mess. Let's just focus on Thor Ragnarok and Jojo Rabbit. I know I said the Marvel machine isn't filmmaker friendly, but there are some breakthroughs, and Thor Ragnarok is a kinetic, grand, visually extravagant burst of energy that is exactly the kind of attitude Aladdin should be approached with. And Taika absolutely has the skill set and imagination to bring something incredibly fresh to the table. And Jojo Rabbit, while on the surface being a silly, quirky little satire, absolutely devastated me and ripped my heart right out of my chest. So I think Taika is also capable of naturally blending a heartfelt depth to all the fun and excitement. I just remembered that Taika Waititi is actually kind of a bad person, so as a safety net, I'd be fairly confident with hiring South Asian filmmaker Anish Chaganty, who has shown expert craftsmanship in storytelling and heart with his films like Run and Searching. Okay, moving on to Cinderella. Now, I think this is hands down the best directed of the Disney live-action films, and Kenneth Branagh did a surprisingly wonderful job of bringing a storybook fairy tale to life in a way that felt painterly, rich, and enchanting. I say it's surprising he did such a good job because, he is not the most consistent filmmaker, and I'd say most of the time he misses than hits. He directed Artemis Fowl, for Christ's sake, and now he's doing that middling, frequently dumb Agatha Christie murder mystery series, though I actually enjoyed Haunting in Venice, the most recent one. Anyway, if you want to know what I thought kept Kenneth Branagh's Cinderella from being absolutely perfect, I made a video on that, so go watch it. But yeah, this is the one case where I don't necessarily think a different director needed to take on this project. But if I were to pick someone who I think could have done an excellent and maybe even better job, I'd choose Autumn de Wilde, the director of 2020's Emma, which was just a lavish, sumptuous visual feast, and I'd love to see what she'd do with a bigger budget and some Disney magic. But I'll also say I'd love to see what Greta Gerwig would do with Cinderella, because with her other films, she always embraces the source material while, at the same time, finding a unique, smart, creative angle to approach it. So either one of them would be great. Okay, now let's move on to The Little Mermaid, and for this one, I couldn't settle on a single filmmaker fully, because I could think of quite a few who would all bring something great to the table. And if you've been following my channel for a while, you know my feelings about Rob Marshall, who directed The Little Mermaid. I am very, very happy he chose Halle Bailey to play Ariel, but he should have stepped down to a producer position after that point because he just does not have the directorial instincts or the visionary sensibilities or the storytelling skills to be in charge of such an ambitious project. And frankly, given that half the film takes place in an underwater fantasy mermaid kingdom, this should have been the biggest, most visually groundbreaking, must-see event film of all the Disney live actions, but Rob Marshall's bland, lifeless, uninspired, visionless approach greatly prevented the film from being the revolutionary spectacle it very much could have and should have been. And I think I'm especially venomous and annoyed at him and Disney because they did such a disservice to Halle Bailey when they knew she was going to get inevitable backlash anyway, and that just rubs me the wrong way. I'm salty about it, and that also is why I talk about this film so much. I'm not over it, and I have a lot to get off my chest. Yeah, I've slowly been working on a video where I fully break down what I think the live-action Little Mermaid film should have been from a creative, visual, and storytelling perspective, so I don't know when that's coming, but stick around. Anyway, who do I think would be the right fit for The Little Mermaid? One choice that comes to mind is Academy Award-winning filmmaker Alfonso Cuarón. His filmography is incredibly varied, going from the charmingly magical A Little Princess, the adult coming-of-age road movie Y Tu Mamá También, the most beloved entry in the Harry Potter franchise, the dystopian action movie Children of Men, the space thriller Gravity, and the artful semi-autobiographical drama Roma. So yeah, this man has range, going from fantasy fun to heartfelt drama to eye-popping spectacle. He never makes the same movie twice, but he has the toolset and experience to take on something as demanding as The Little Mermaid and do so with the highest level of craftsmanship that would be the difference between audiences going, "Oh, another soulless Disney remake," to, "Oh, this actually looks really cool and I'm curious to see it." Because it would most likely be pushing technology into exciting new territory while also just having strong storytelling and distinctive artistry. And he's been producing some Disney projects lately, so yeah. Okay, hear me out on my other choices for The Little Mermaid. First, Gore Verbinski, who directed the first few Pirates of the Caribbean films, which were incredibly trailblazing in terms of modern blockbusters and visual effects, and even if the storytelling isn't always great in those films, the filmmaking itself is always top-notch, and just hire somebody to write a really great script and tell Verbinski to sort of go for a Pirates of the Caribbean with a more lighthearted, fantastical, feminine quality, like a Disney-fied romantic era painting, and I think we got a hell of a Little Mermaid film out of that. Other options for directors include J.A. Bayona, who is really great with both drama, fantasy, and visual effects, and Joachim Ronning, who did 2 Disney sequels that had horrible scripts but were very nicely directed. Watch his Pirates of the Caribbean movie back to back with Rob Marshall's, and there's a clear difference in quality. And another option could be Peter Jackson, who revolutionized the modern blockbuster epic with Lord of the Rings films and King Kong. Tell him to tap into his softer sensibilities and you got something special. And I know I already used Guillermo del Toro for Beauty and the Beast, but I also think Little Mermaid is very much in his wheelhouse. Okay, before I move on to selecting directors for films that haven't been released or even developed yet, I just want to say we don't have a proper adaptation of Disney's Alice in Wonderland because Tim Burton's film was a pseudo-sequel to the Lewis Carroll story itself, so I would die to see Yorgos Lanthimos just absolutely go off with a Disney adaptation of Alice in Wonderland, especially after seeing what he's doing with his upcoming film Poor Things. Alright, next is Snow White. I'm not able to fully judge the direction here yet because we haven't seen any footage from the film at this point in time, but from what I have seen, I have some questions and concerns, and generally Mark Webb is not my fave. I would have chosen La La Land director Damien Chazelle because he's just so great at capturing a dazzling old Hollywood vibe that very much applies to Snow White, and in addition to his sweeping musical sequences, he provides substance. Yeah. Next is Hercules. Now, Guy Ritchie is apparently attached to direct this one as well, and I'm gonna have to shoo him away and say, no, you got semi-lucky with Aladdin, but you would prevent this film from reaching its potential. And while Taika Waititi definitely could apply here as well, I think a project like Hercules would benefit from a director like Baz Luhrmann. You know, Great Gatsby, Romeo and Juliet, Elvis. He has a very loud, distinctive, extravagant, overindulgent style that blends contemporary elements into historical settings, and that's just perfect for Hercules, which revolves around ancient Greece but is infused with pop culture references and a chaotic flair that is just right up Baz Luhrmann's alley. And apparently Baz Luhrmann is being eyed for the Tangled remake, which I hope isn't the case because that is not a match at all. Tangled should go to Greta Gerwig for sure because it matches her sensibilities more, and I know she also would bring out a new interesting layer to the story that would be very necessary considering the animated film came out not long ago. As for Princess and the Frog, that's going to Nia DaCosta for sure. If you've seen DaCosta's Candyman film, not only is it one of the most skillful, refreshing, gorgeously directed mainstream films I've seen in a while, but her nuanced exploration into Black culture and Black history is brilliant and important. She'd be a perfect fit to bring justice to this property, which is one of the Disney films that I think actually would benefit from a live-action adaptation, especially from a Black female filmmaker who would make the necessary corrections to have a more insightful, sensitive angle on the first ever Black Disney princess. And DaCosta's lived experience would naturally provide that quality. Okay, so that's what I'm thinking. I'm a believer that any project, no matter how pointless or soulless or shallow or uninteresting it may seem in concept, can be made into something truly great and special if there's a skillful, thoughtful filmmaker with a clear vision behind the camera. So yeah, that's all I have to say for now. Yeah. Alright. Love ya, bye.